Hello and welcome to this online tutorial on how to use the Retrospective Lexicon in your retrospective. My name is Paul Goddard and I created this card game to help Agile teams go deeper in their retrospective meetings. In this video, I demonstrate how the cards can be used to run a team retrospective. I hope you find it useful.
So, let me just explain. My name is Paul Goddard. I'm an Agile coach working in the UK, and this is a product that I created about last autumn called the Retrospective Lexicon. It's a set of cards, and if you can see on the camera, I've got a deck of these cards in front of me here, and I've got the paper-based version here that I was going to walk through with you, and I'm going to show you how you can use them online. There's a couple of cards there on the screen that explain what the product is, where it came from, and how it can be used. This was an idea that came originally from my book, of my books around improvising with Agile teams. And improvisers on stage use a lot of emotions, and they do play emotional games, and they're very good at tailoring their content and their style to different emotions on stage. So I use these cards as a way for Agile teams to help demonstrate and play a little bit with their emotions, and certainly talk about their emotions in a retrospective format. So the cards themselves are quite loose in terms of how you can use them, but I'll just describe in this short little session today on how you can structure a retrospective using these cards. So there's three different types of cards in the deck. There's firstly adjectives cards, and adjectives cards are simple words that you can use to describe events or a retrospective data that you've collected. You've got emotions cards, which are there to help team members identify and categorize feelings that they experienced during the sprint or the retrospective itself. And you've got action cards. And those action cards are words to help promote and prompt different types of change and different ways that we can go about taking action or improving ourselves during the retrospective. So these cards were created as a way to try and help teams move past very bland and binary retrospectives that I've experienced, where team members classify data as good or bad, good things that happened, or positive and negative things that happened, and move past it, get a bit more descriptive about the data and descriptive about their emotions, and talk about their emotions a bit more freely. And also with the action is to try and get teams to move past just start and stop and keep, which are the kind of the bog standard action-based games that you can play in a retrospective. These tools were aimed to try and move teams past that. So we're going to use this Jamboard now to try and help demonstrate how the cards can be used. And bear in mind, it is online, so I'm going to share with you a few cards, and we're going to play along online. So if you can look at your own web browser, you'll see that Jamboard is split into 4 different screens. At the top of the screen, you can change the screen number. And I'm going to ask you to move on to screen number 2, which is just a blank piece of flip chart at the moment. And we're going to have a play around with this. So here, if I can just demonstrate this, I can draw on this, and you should be able to see what I'm drawing. So I've split the flip chart into 3. And first of all, we're just going to, in this retrospective today, only a short one, we're going to retrospect as a group on the last kind of 7 days, what's happened over the last 7 days. And I'm sure we're all in different locations doing different things, but I'm pretty sure there's also some similarities in the kind of restrictions that we're all under at the moment. So we're going to just retrospect on the last 7 days each. Bear in mind, of course, this is completely anonymous. The benefit of Jamboard is I can't see who's writing and who's entering the retrospective data as we go. Okay, so we're going to use these cards to help us. Now, the benefit of some of the digital content I've got here is I can add some cards to help us describe some of the events that have occurred over the last 7 days. So I'm going to give you a few examples, and then hopefully you'll be able to have a go and add to this yourself. So I'm going to put a few different cards on the screen, and again, hopefully you should be able to see these appearing on your screen as well. These are adjectives cards. I'll get them all out to begin with, and then we can go through them. So first of all, on the left-hand side, I put the card funny. So anything that you can describe, an event that's occurred in the last 7 days that you would categorize for yourself as, you describe it as a funny event. And again, so we're going to try and collect those in the left-hand side. In the middle of the screen, you've got healthy. So healthy, you know, something that's happened over the last 7 days, or something that's an event or some kind of element of the last 7 days that you would describe with the word healthy. And thirdly, we've got on the right-hand side, dull. Something that's happened over the last 7 days that you would describe as dull. Okay, so we're going to play this like you would a normal retrospective, but using the Jamboard to do this. If you've not used Jamboard before, you have the option on the left-hand side to add sticky notes. So you can do that. I'll demonstrate what you can do now. You can click on sticky notes and you can add something, some text, and then you can simply save it. You can even change the color if you so wish, and you can move that around on the screen to whichever part of the retrospective, or sorry, whichever category you put that data event into. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you to play around with this now for a couple of minutes yourself. So I'm going to ask each of you to add 2 post-its to the retrospective at this point. So something that's happened over the last 7 days that you would categorize as either funny, healthy, or dull, and just put it into the appropriate category based on your last 7 days. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. I'll have a go as well. I'll join in. Good, okay. Yeah, so if this was, and hopefully if you're a Scrum Master yourself or part of a Scrum team, you'd hopefully spend a lot longer than maybe 5 minutes doing this, but you'd certainly spend even longer discussing any particular patterns, trends, or maybe differences of opinion. If this was retrospective data, if we were all part of the same team, we'd be looking for patterns. So yeah, and just these cards are there to kind of just promote, instead of just talk different good or bad events, this is to try and help categorize those events again as well. We'll step on to the second flip charts. So if you move to screen number 3. So yeah, flip chart number 3. We'll do it slightly differently. We'll use a different category of cards. So we'll step onto more emotional content now. So I'm going to do the same type of thing. I'm going to split that flip chart into 3, if you can see that. But we'll use some different cards this time. So more emotional content. So first of all, we've got hope. Second, we've got gratitude. And third, we've got doubt. In fact, I'll just swap these over. Okay, so again, you're thinking about the last 7 days. You're thinking about events that have occurred over the last 7 days for yourself. And now you're trying to categorize not so much around the description of the event, but more the emotions that those events have stimulated. So again, it's another form of data capture, but it's much more based around emotional connection. So just to go through these one by one, hope, anything that's happened over the last 7 days that has filled you with a sense or given you a sense of hope. Secondly, gratitude, anything that's happened or that you're experiencing that gives you a sense, an emotion around gratitude or thanks. And thirdly, you've got doubt, anything over the last 7 days that has occurred that's causing you an element of doubt. Great. So again, just to remind you, these cards were aimed really to help teams start to deal with and talk about their emotions. And again, from my experience as an agile coach over the last 10, 15 years, this is an area that I think agile teams have generally struggled with, because we're not really wired to talk about our emotions. They're not seen as something we have to access very, very often. So I think it does vary team on team and by organization, but generally, from the people that I've worked with, more introverted characters tend to struggle more with talking about their emotions, certainly in front of their colleagues. So the words were designed as a way to help start a conversation and to increase a little bit of self-awareness around emotions in ourselves before we can start to recognize amongst them in other people within our teams as well. A lot of people have said this is quite a scary thing, talking about emotions and actually calling out emotions, but it can be one of the key starting points for building a team and forming a team, is an awareness and an empathy around the emotions that other people in your team are experiencing. And it does require some heavy lifting from my point of view as well. Good stuff. Thank you for that. If you just flip that down to the final flip chart number 4 on the Jamboard, it's another clean one. We'll finish this retrospective now with some actions. And as you will know, the best part of any retrospective really is it's never as good as the data if you haven't actually taken some action at the end of it. So we'll just, again, use the same format for the final sheet here. And we're going to use some action cards. Now, these action cards were designed to try and help teams move past simple commands and simple actions like starting something and stopping something, to try and get a little bit more descriptive about different types of actions. So I'll give you 3 examples again. So the first one is experiment. So instead of just saying we're going to start doing something, experimentation gives license for a little bit of learning, a little bit of succeeding and failing, rather than just doing something and expecting it to work. So we can experiment with something. We've also got, secondly, locate. So that might be going out and locating a person or some information. It might be some knowledge that we're missing within the team. So we might have to go out and find that. So that's locate. If I add another one, and the final one, it will be reduce. So instead of looking at what do we have to eliminate or get rid of or stop doing, what can we actually mitigate or decrease the impact of within the team or within the way we work? All right, so 3 different actions. So you'll notice as well a pattern in this particular retrospective that I designed for you today. We've done what in the pack, we've got a mixture of positive and negative types of card. So in this case, we've got positive and negative actions. Experiment and locate tend to be a bit more positive, whereas reduce tends to be a bit more negative. And that's the same theme I've applied to the other 2 types of cards that you've seen as well. In each in the deck I've got, there's 18 of each card, and 9 of each of the 18 are positive and negative. So you've got a bit of variation. And we'll perhaps talk a bit about how you might structure a retrospective at the end. But we've got 2 positive and 1 negative action cards here. So I'll just make these a bit smaller so you can add your own data to these. So again, same as before, we're just going to ask you to add a couple of sticky notes to describe the next 7 days now. So if you're trying to plan some actions that you'd like to put into place in the next 7 days for you yourself, would there be anything that you'd like to experiment with? Would there be anything that you need to locate? Is there anything that you'd like to reduce? Just a few examples on Post-its on the flip chart, and then we'll perhaps look at some ways that you can work with that data. Just a couple of minutes for yourself then to add some data to that final sheet. Okay, I think most people finish those off. That's great. So again, if we were doing a slightly longer retrospective, or we need to spend a bit longer on taking some actions and perhaps condensing these downs into something that more members of the team can work on together, we might choose to group some of these. And the good thing, again, it's about Jamboard. It's a good tool for doing a number of things. I'll just try and demonstrate these now. So there's kind of a laser pointer tool, which if you just watch the screen, you can kind of highlight things, and you can draw. Obviously, you've got drawing tools. You can create. You can move items around, or you can create kind of annotations on those if you wanted to do things like that. The other thing I found, again, for dot voting, which again isn't always completely obvious, but you can do some cool things with a highlighter tool. You can just literally mark. If you look at the top right of the screen, you can mark. You can dot vote if people wanted to add a virtual line or dot vote something fairly easily. And again, it's all anonymous, so you could use it with your own Google account, but you can keep things nicely anonymous if you so wished. Okay. So again, we've explained maybe 3 different cards there, 3 different types of cards. And the idea was I was deliberately quite loose when I designed this pack on how to use the cards. So there's 3 types of cards, and you can use as many of those cards as you wish. You can use as few of those cards. Some of the Scrum Masters that I've worked with who use these, sometimes they'll just use the emotion cards, and they'll have maybe a couple of community cards that will start a conversation around emotions they've experienced during a sprint. Or sometimes they just use the action cards if they want to actually move that part of their retrospectives forwards a bit quicker. They might shuffle up a couple of different action types and see if they can come up with some actions if they're struggling for ways forward. It's really up to you as to how you can use them. Did you have any questions? So feel free to open up your microphones. We've got about 8 minutes left because I do want to stick to the times that I suggested. If you've got any questions about the cards themselves or about how they can be used.
George here, if I can go first. One question that occurred to me was I love the tool. I love the cards and all of that. And rightly, as you said, they kind of serve as conversation starters and bring out a lot of the thoughts that reside in people's minds. My question was regarding when it comes to having those conversations around whatever we put on the board. Normally, what I've seen in my experience is when you do it physically and you put post-its on the board, we invite whoever wants to talk about those post-its and particular cards, and they first talk about what their views are, and then the rest of the group opens up and we have a discussion around it. When you're anonymously posting these on a Jamboard, how do you go about that conversation?
So it's a good question, George. It's an assumption that I think has been questioned. I've had questioned myself around. I was of the opinion that doing retrospectives in person was not the only way, but certainly the most efficient way of passing on this information. Now, I think a lot of that is still very much true, but there is an advantage here to being anonymous, and for a lot of more introverted characters within Scrum teams, the ability to write something down anonymously and see maybe someone else in the same team write something very similar down anonymously might make it easier to talk about. So in some respects, this might be an easier tool by leaving things more anonymous to allow more shy people or more introverted characters in your team to actually contribute. Because I've seen a huge is perhaps an overestimation, a significant shift in remote working, where a lot more quieter members of teams have actually found it a lot easier to be more vocal. And sometimes being able to type something first does allow people to start that conversation. Whereas if they were in a room, and don't underestimate as well the difference here, and I'm looking into your little houses, and you can see into my little house here. So that element of safety that I get from, yes, I can see there's a bit of a window, a gallery here of some of the houses, some of the people, but I'm in my own safe place. Rather than being in an office environment in a goldfish bowl where other people can look into a meeting room, I'm in my own house, and I might be able to say something at home that I might not say in the office. So it's quite interesting how the dynamic is different, but it doesn't mean to say it's any worse. It could actually be, for some teams, for some team members, it could be a whole lot better.
So we've used Front Retro boards, and they have voting.
Yeah,
So even if people, so a lot of them need time, especially the coders need time to think.
yeah,
So writing it down gives them time to think, and then when people vote on it, you just talk about the top 3 things that are voted on. That's why it was interesting here about the voting and how to do it. And it does mean that they're not on their own in their thoughts.
yeah.
So it gives the people who would be quieter a chance to talk.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Sharon. I've certainly seen a surprising response in terms of the retrospectives I've been part of since this happened, and the amount of interactions we've had. It's not as quiet as you might think. Does that help, George? Is that different to how you might anticipate it might happen?
No, it's all good. Like I said, there's different ways to doing things, and the more the merrier. So you can try and experiment, whatever
Yeah,
works.
yeah,
Yeah. One other thing I've seen, which is different to this mode, is to keep a retro board kind of as a living document,
yes,
yes. So people can keep adding, and you don't have to, come to the room and start thinking. So that's slightly different to this. But I think whatever works for each team, or you can try a mix and match of
yeah,
different strategies as well.
sure.
Yeah.
Sarah, there's a question here on, I think you put on the chat to everyone. Is it intentional that everyone can move any card? It's certainly intentional in terms of the tool. I think that's part of how Jamboard works. I mean, there's nothing to stop you, hijacking and moving some of my cards around into different sections, and there's kind of an element here of I think a good practice and being respectful of not moving someone else's card into another section. So there's an element here of perhaps some ground rules you might have to set using this particular tool. But I kind of like that it is quite freeform, and it does allow teams to play around with these a little bit. You might want to slightly adjust perhaps some ground rules set out before you start out if you think that people will abuse the sticky notes. So yeah, great. Thank you for coming. I hope it's been useful. But I wish you the best of luck. Stay safe, look after yourselves, and see you again soon.
So there we go. The Retrospective Lexicon is a great way to increase the levels of communication and empathy in your team discussions. The Retrospective Lexicon is available to buy now from our online Amazon store. If you'd like to see some of the other great products that Agilify can offer, then check out our website link in the description below. Thanks for watching.